Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know there's still some people who are going to be trickling in, but I don't want to hold it up anymore because we have so much information to cover this morning. So my name is Denise Benson, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Blue Summit Consulting Group. We are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and a Project Management Institute premier authorized training partner. We provide certification exam prep, workforce development courses, instructional design, and project management consulting. So today's webinar, AI and Project Management, is the first in a new webinar series that we are launching. This series is designed to bring fresh, topical content to you, and we will be hosting recurring sessions on the first Thursday of every month from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. In today's session, we'll explore the world of AI and how you can use this valuable tool to enhance your projects. So to get us started today, I'm going to launch a poll that has 2 quick questions, and this is going to help us get a better sense of your experience and use of AI. Take a minute to answer the questions quickly. So it looks like generally, everyone has used AI a little bit, right? So anything from occasionally to frequent to everyday use. And it's everyone who answered has used ChatGPT. And we have a couple people who have used Microsoft Copilot. All right. Our instructor today is Derek Beck. He is the founder and CEO of Blue Summit Consulting Group. Derek is an agile transformation consultant, project management instructor, and U.S. military veteran with over 25 years of experience in project and operations management. He's been the driving force behind Blue Summit's integration of artificial intelligence, ensuring that we not only adopt new technologies, but also leverage them to enhance training design, development, and delivery. Derek's passion for incorporating innovative tools into project management has been a cornerstone of our success. In addition to his work with Blue Summit, Derek has contributed extensively to the project management field, serving in leadership roles such as the president of Agile Augusta and as a board member for PMI Augusta-Aiken. He's also one of the first globally certified disciplined Agile coaches shaping PMI's Agile curriculum. So please join me in welcoming Derek Beck as he leads us through today's webinar, AI and Project Management. Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you everybody for showing up. I see Chris and Lynette and Reveille and some familiar names. Really appreciate you guys' support and showing up today. Hopefully I can share some valuable information for you guys as we talk about this artificial intelligence and the use of project management, but probably giving some advice on how to use it broadly for a lot of different things, to be quite honest with you. Like Denise said, I was in the Navy for 20 years, retired, live in Augusta, Georgia. When I retired from service, I was located here. And what you see on your screen, by the way, I've used images from generative AI tools like DALL-E and Midjourney. And so I thought for this presentation specifically, I'd just kind of share with you the tool that I used and also the prompt. So you can see, to get to an image like this, I can use a simple prompt like Admiral Taco, and I can get this kind of results. After the Navy, though, I continue to do a lot of project and program management. I just kind of continued on in that work as a federal contractor. In this case, I used a face swap tool within Midjourney, so it's my face, but I came up with a different image. And just to show you that, it can get even a little bit more detailed, but I can still come up with a cool image, whether you have a simple prompt or a more complex prompt. I think that's pretty interesting. And I'll bring that up again when we come back. Okay. I've been learning about AI and talking about AI now for probably the last 6 years. I'm not necessarily a supercomputer wizard as far as like the coding and the development of AI, but as a practitioner and a user, I've been trying out just about all the different tools that are out there, try to test its limits. I try to figure out how can this actually be useful for me? And in the meantime, learning more about how these systems work has enabled me to, figure out a good way to start prompting these things, and then also, leverage those capabilities to improve workflow, speed of workflow, and even the quality of work in general, and research. And I'll talk about that too. Um, yeah. So been very successful at that so far. So anyway, what is AI? That is 7 patterns of AI and some tips and tricks. That's the agenda today. That's what I'm going to try and cover within this hour. Okay. But before I get into that, though, I do want to talk about why we should care about AI in the first place. So there was a study by Gartner not too long ago, and it revealed that the expectation is that AI is going to take over 80% of all our project management tasks by 2030. And I think a lot of people see that statistic and go, wow, that's going to put my job at risk, right? What am I going to do if 20% of my job is the only thing that's remaining? But I don't think that that's actually the case, right? I think what this ends up meaning for us is that we have a lot of routine, tedious tasks that are chewing up a significant portion of our time and preventing us from doing the things that only humans can do, like develop strategy, to create new things, and art direct that a little bit, and to lead and to mentor other people. And the stuff that machines can't quite do just yet. And so I think we see that reflected in jobs reports. So a PMI study found that the global need for project management is going to grow by 25 million new jobs by the year of 2030. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics here in the United States just reported just this year that project management specialists, or the field of project management, um, is expected to be the fastest growing field for the next 10 years, with about 68,000 new project management jobs every year through 2035. So I don't think that anybody's expecting AI to replace any actual humans anytime soon. But I will say that not leveraging AI and not integrating the tools that are out there is going to put your job at risk, because the people that do are going to outpace you. They're going to work faster. Their quality is going to be higher of their outputs. Um, but I think even more dangerous, or even just as dangerous, is not knowing how to use the tool correctly. You can use AI and get really, really bad outputs. Okay, so just using AI alone isn't going to make you better. You have to understand how this stuff works to be able to use it effectively. Okay. It's just as dangerous as not using it at all. Sometimes it might even be worse, because you're not putting any of yourself into the output, right? Any of your own expertise and knowledge and experience. And that's a problem. All right, so what is AI? Well, there really isn't a solid, actual single definition. You can look it up, and there's going to be about 1,000 different definitions that are out there. So I think it's pretty hard to nail down that definition, but we can know that it generally refers to the simulation of human intelligence. I think that's a key word: simulation of human intelligence processes by machines. And what processes are we talking about? Well, we're talking about learning, reasoning, and self-correction. And what we mean by learning is the acquisition of information and rules for using that information. Reasoning, using rules to reach approximate or definite conclusions. And the self-correction. And so this is the process by which AI systems will improve their performance over time through iterative feedback and error analysis, so that way they can continue to adapt and enhance their accuracy as they're exposed to new data and learn from their mistakes. And I have an example of that a little bit later, actually. So essentially, the AI technologies are designed to analyze our data, make decisions, and perform tasks that would typically require human intelligence. Now, AI can be broadly divided into 2 different categories: narrow AI and general AI. And narrow and general AI are categorized by their scope and capability. So it defines how capable an AI is and what range of tasks that the AI system can actually handle. So what is narrow AI? Narrow AI is also known as, or referred to as, weak AI. These are systems that are designed and trained specifically to perform a limited set of tasks. Okay. These systems don't actually possess any intelligence or consciousness, even though they might seem like they do. They can't apply any of their knowledge beyond the narrow focus for which they were designed. And some examples of this are like voice assistants. I don't want to say it out loud, but the Apple one or the Amazon one, because all my devices will go haywire right now if I call out their name. Google Assistant, so they can understand speech, set reminders, or answer questions, um, but they're limited to predefined functions. Recommendation systems is another one. So Netflix, Amazon, they use AI to suggest content based on your viewing or purchasing habits, and but they're very specialized for recommendations only. They can't really go beyond that in their tasking. And there's even question on how good or accurate they are, right? And chatbots. So we have a lot of chatbots, agents, they're saying now, right, that are built off of things like ChatGPT's APIs and whatnot. And they're trained on very specific data sets to answer queries about a product or a service. But then anything that's unrelated to the task that they were built to respond to, they can't get there. Now, this is the AI that we have today. It's all of its narrow AI. Even when they're very mature AI systems, they're really just multiple types of AI that are integrated, right? But they're performing a very specific task, passing that output to something else that performs a task on it, passing it to something else that performs a task on it, and so on and so forth. And so it may seem like they can think, it may can seem like they can know, but they cannot. So more on that a little bit later. What everybody fears and what everybody's afraid of is what's called general AI. You also hear artificial general intelligence, or AGI, or strong AI. And this refers to the AI system that can perform intellectual tasks that humans can do. This is very theoretical at this point, but it would possess general cognitive abilities like reasoning, problem solving, understanding abstract concepts, learning new skills independently of data that are provided to it by a human. Like I said, this is the technology that everybody's afraid of. And thankfully, it doesn't actually exist just yet, but that's what they're trying to get to. They being the people and the innovators that are behind all the technology and funding it and driving it. They're trying to get to this general AI. Um, let's see here. Yeah, so narrow AI using deep learning and some other types of AI, like self-driving cars that use deep learning algorithms uh, to interpret sensor data, recognize objects, make driving decisions. That's an example of the narrow AI. Whereas general AI, it can hypothetically drive the car on its own, write a novel, learn a new language, cook a meal, and all based on the same underlying intelligence that we would have to be able to learn tasks autonomously. I'm not really worried about this personally because we don't even really know how the human brain works 100% yet. So, how can we possibly model the human brain in a computer just yet? We're not there. And AI is not just AI, right? It's a complex and it's a pretty deep topic. We're totally oversimplifying AI today. But the reality is, it's not just Microsoft Copilot and Chat GPT. It has a lot of forms. There's a different underlying technologies that like NLP, or natural language processing, or deep learning, or machine learning, or what we know mostly Chat GPT, Microsoft Copilot, that kind of stuff. That's generative AI. Okay. So a lot of, and then there's a tons of subtypes of each of these, and they're all in specialized categories and different types of AI, even beyond this. It's just a vast field that really touches every aspect of our lives, whether we know it or not. Like I said, I already called out like the personal assistants, autocorrect, um, targeted advertising based on pattern recognition, the recommendation systems. We've had these for a very long time, and that has all been driven on AI. If you use Photoshop or anything like that, content aware fill, these are all AI systems that have been around for years. They're just getting better at what they do. So to highlight this and the extensive reach of AI, a company called Cognilytica, which was recently purchased by PMI, has identified 7 general patterns of AI. Really, it's different use cases of AI, but they call it patterns of AI use, representing common approaches to apply AI effectively and for different tasks. No, I dive into this pretty deep into an article that I just wrote. So I'll just kind of summarize these now. But if you want to dive into them a little bit deeper, you can kind of take a look at that. Or you can consider taking some of the courses on AI from the Project Management Institute that are really good. Like I said, they just purchased that company called Cognilytica, which has a great certification course for AI and project management. I would advise to check that out. Um, and there's also a PMI practice guide for AI that goes even deeper than all of that, right? That you can get. So if you're a member of PMI, that's actually a free download for you as a resource if you're a paid member. But one of the patterns is autonomous systems. And so this is not to be confused with automation. Autonomous systems can perform tasks, achieve specific goals with minimal human intervention, right? They combine perception, decision making, and control to operate independently. So it's like self-driving cars and robotics. There was conversation and human interaction, and this pattern of AI systems is designed to interact naturally with humans. So think the chatbots and the virtual assistants, like I talked about. Goal-driven systems. These are systems that are used to achieve specific objectives. So they leverage reinforcement learning. These systems are trained to optimize towards a specific goal, right? And they continuously improve based on trial and error. AlphaGo. So that's the AI that defeated the human world champion at the board game Go, using reinforcement learning to improve its gameplay based on responses from the opponent. That's one example. Um, Heck, I think even ChatGPT, for example, learned how to pass the bar exam in one state and got all the questions right. Thought that was pretty interesting. Hyper-personalization uses AI to create personalized experiences based on individual user data. So these systems analyze preferences, behaviors, and other patterns that tailor content to or recommendations for each user. So this is the Netflix, the recommendations engines, Netflix, Amazon, you name it. Like I said, targeted advertising that falls under hyper-personalization. There's pattern and anomaly detection. So this is about recognizing patterns or detecting anomalies in data. These systems are useful in identifying unusual behavior, finding trends in data. So fraud detection. So AI systems in banking that flag suspicious transactions such as potential fraud. You might use AI tools in project management to identify potential risks that have arisen, for example, or identify when your processes are going out of control. You might have automated systems in place to kind of detect those patterns. It can even get into things like cameras that can now detect if someone has a weapon in their hand, right? Or cameras can detect suspicious behavior or something based on patterns that they recognize in body movement or shapes of that, or something like that. Cybersecurity, healthcare, they all use AI tools like this. Okay, so predictive analytics is pattern number 6. And so these are systems that use AI to forecast future events based on historical data. So we can identify trends. So financial systems, fintech will use this. Things like stock trading, sales forecasting. So AI models that predict future sales based on historical data and external factors like market trends. And then they can in warp speed, dig through all that data and then come up with a model for you to give you probabilities of predictions. Weather prediction. We've been using AI models for a long time for that. Think like when we're trying to predict the path of a hurricane, right? And just different weather patterns. Um, so, like I said, business intelligence, finance, healthcare, again, predicting disease outbreaks, marketing, supply chain management, and supply chain risk management. So, all of that stuff can fall under predictive analytics. And then there's the recognition systems. This is where they classify object, people, audio, text, or any form of unstructured data. And actually, this is probably more into like the image recognition, like facial recognition systems. So think like Clear, right? Think like those cameras that can identify the objects. Speech recognition. They've got the AI tools now that can identify what language someone is speaking and translate in near real time, or take a video and translate your English or whatever language you're in to some other language and dub it almost automatically. It's pretty interesting what happens there, right? So a lot of times this is used in security, medical imaging, and natural language processing, so converting audio to text, for example, and user authentication. So those are the different patterns in AI. Um, Really, it's again mostly just use cases. And if you think about it, what I just said touches everything we do, whether we're going to the airport, working with our bank. We've already been using these robots for a long time. All right. For our purposes today, though, I'm going to dive into generative AI because that's most likely what we use, like Claude, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT. PMI has PMI Infinity, which works off the ChatGPT API, but it's tied into their internal resources and their reports, so you can get very specific information related to project management. So their white papers, their research, it's hyper focused on project management. Okay, and so to understand the leverage technology, we do have to understand a little bit about how it works. Again, I'm not going to dive too deep into this. I just want to highlight a couple of key points. And first, I want to say that it's designed to create new content. That's what generative AI will do. So text, images, audio that resembles human generated content. Notice I've said that it doesn't actually have knowledge, right? These are key concepts that we need to work with. So generative AI works using neural networks, right? Neural network is a computational model. It's inspired by the way we think our brains work and what we know of how our brains process information. And then it analyzes and learns patterns out of the data. And so what we do is we give it a bunch of data and then we train it on that. And so the data set then gets used to teach a machine uh, to perform a very specific task based on that data. So it contains examples the model will use to learn patterns. So what is considered a grammatically correct sentence? And then it has examples of what is considered a bad, right, grammar usage. Just things like that. And it has it within all the different fields too. So it can understand, say legal speak or something like that, if it's been trained on a good amount of information from that field. Because what it does then is it takes these patterns and it creates this probabilistic modeling. And probabilistic modeling then is a framework that models uncertainty in data, and then it makes predictions or decisions based on that. So, for example, generative AI will predict the probability of the next word in a sentence. So it'll say the. So based on the input and the context that's been given, I want weather related information. So after the is probably coming in next is the word sky. Then the next word most probably should be is to make a next part of the sentence, so on and so forth, until it says there's an 80% chance, right, that if I, ChatGPT, for example, finish the sentence with the word clouds, that I'll be correct. Right. So there's 80, so just kind of making that number up, right? But that's what it's doing. And so it doesn't actually know that the sky is full of clouds. It's just thinking that most likely that's probably the right answer based on the information that it's got and the patterns that it's been trained upon. So I hope that makes sense. So in general, generative AI works by taking input from a user, then predicting the most likely continuation or output based on patterns that it learned during training or through its interaction with you. So the more you interact, the more context you give it. And in some tools, you're adding to their training, so you're giving them more information. So if you ask a text-based model like ChatGPT to complete a sentence, it predicts that next word or phrase by selecting the most probable option, like I was saying, right? And then it repeats this process iteratively until it forms a coherent response. And that's really all it's doing. So in essence, generative AI imagines the output by drawing on its training data and using mathematical probabilities to simulate creativity or to simulate knowledge, crafting an answer that aligns with the input prompt or the context that you've provided it. It hallucinates everything. We talk about hallucination as like it just makes stuff up, but the reality is it's hallucinating every single answer. It's just that because of its ability to do advanced mathematics, it can be highly accurate in its hallucinations. It's important to remember that though, because when we talk about some of these tips that we're going to use. So let's get into the hot tips. This should take us a few minutes to get through. Hopefully, I'm not going too fast for everybody on this. It's hard when I do this because I can't actually get any feedback or response from everybody. But the first tip that I got for you is context matters. That's the single first most important thing when you're dealing with generative AI is context matters. And what I mean by that is that your context, you need to be specific, you need to be detailed, and you need to be direct. Okay. So don't beat around the bush or anything like that. Remember, these generative AI tools are meant to accomplish very specific tasks. And they also don't actually know anything in the way that we might know something. They're just responding to patterns and patterns in your input as well. So the more clear and the more specific you are, the better results you're going to get. So what do we mean by, specific, detailed, and direct? Come on, next slide. Okay. So what we need to do is tell the tool very clearly and as concisely as you possibly can who you are, and what you're trying to accomplish, and who you're doing it for. When you add detailed context and clear instructions, the AI can then more accurately tailor its response to your needs because you've given it clear parameters to do its math. And the fewer assumptions that AI has to make, the better. So you can even use negative prompting when you're prompting these generative AI tools. So whether you're creating an image, a video, or you want some kind of text-based output, tell it what format you want, tell it what you don't want, right? And that's really important. Set the parameters. I see a lot of the online influencers, and they put out there, you got to tell ChatGPT that you got to start with "you are the expert in," and I'll tell you that's not 100% true. You don't actually have to tell ChatGPT it's an expert because ChatGPT knows that it's an expert in everything. It's so biased for yes, it doesn't want to tell you that it doesn't actually know anything, right? So it is an expert in everything. So what it needs is mostly just the context. So when people see results from saying you are an expert in, it's just because the only thing that the system has picked up on is whatever that expertise you wanted it to hone in on, right? And it's already gearing up now to look specific for specific patterns and words and facts and whatever else it's got in there based on engineering, computing, project management, you name it, right? That's what you're doing in reality. So it's also best to say, I am an instructional designer and this is what I'm trying to do. This is the audience that I'm trying to work towards. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. Where do I start, kind of thing, right? Or if you already know the specific task, give it its very specific task, and that's going to help you. And I'm not going to give you prompts directly because I've realized that there is no one magic prompt that's going to help, right? Instead, just create prompts that work for you that make sense. And if you don't get that output, you can always iterate and evolve on that. Instead, it's better to understand these basic principles to work with to get the outputs that you desire. Okay. Watch your length. So this is a hot tip because if your prompt is too short, it may be too vague to give you a response. Like if you tell it to you know, tell me everything you know about project management. Well, that's pretty wide and deep, right? And so it's going to try and then give you a little bit of everything, and you're not going to get the whole answer. And it may be so vague that it may create facts that don't exist and all that other kind of stuff. So it may make incorrect assumptions about what you need to, and it goes off on a tangent that's not even relevant to what you're asking. But if your prompt is too long, you can actually overwhelm the system because you confuse it. You dilute the main point. The large language model might focus on a less relevant part of your prompt if it's super long, which can lead to responses that stray pretty far from what you want to, right? And I had a thought on this too, but I think it's important to recognize that the system works on a system of tokens. And so tokens are building blocks of text for AI models, so it enables them to work efficiently with language. And a token will represent a unit of text. Actually, before I go on with this, that's what I was going to say. It's also weighted by what you put in the front of a prompt. All of these language models work that way. So the things that are said earlier in a prompt are considered more important than the stuff that comes later. So if you have a really long prompt and your ask is at the end, you may not get the exact output that you desire or as good of an output as you would want. So be as clear and concise and direct as you can and put the important information up front. Okay, so back to tokens. So tokens represent that unit of text. They can be as small as a single character, but it could parse it out as a word or a subword depending on the model's design. And the reason why they exist is because they break down text for the computer into manual pieces for the model to analyze and then generate responses. So, for example, there might be a phrase like ChatGPT is amazing, and it might be tokenized as ChatGPT is a token, the word is a token, the word amazing is a token, and then the exclamation point is a token, right? So it includes the punctuation and spaces where it feels that it's necessary for it to derive its knowledge of your context. So it's trying to analyze and get you what you actually want. So it's also important to know that there's a maximum number of tokens that can be processed in a single input or output. Every tool has different numbers of tokens. For example, the GPT-4 model that exists right now can handle up to about 8,000 tokens per interaction. So if your prompt is 4,000 tokens, your response will only be a 4,000 token response. That's why you get responses sometimes where it's like at these bullet points, it gives you two, 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 two. When you see that pattern, you should probably be a little bit wary of the output, the quality of the output, because there's probably more information there. You're just going to have to hone in and ask more about it. Okay. So again, as concise as you could possibly be, because that gives the computer more tokens to work with in its actual response. Okay. Um, the exclamation point, I think this is an important point to bring up, is that the reason why I would want to create a token for, say, an exclamation point or a question mark is because that's how the computer infers emotion. And so if you just have a very bland sentence in there, you probably can get a rambling, sort of response. In masterclass, they put out some information in their generative AI course that you should tell it, my boss is going to kill me if I don't get this right, or my job could be on the line if I take too long, right? So they advise giving it sort of like a threat, a threat prompt is what they call it, I think. So, but in reality, what it's doing is just it's recognizing urgency. And so you don't necessarily have to say those words to do that. You can actually use less tokens to say the same thing and use exclamation points to make your point. Okay. But it does recognize urgency. So if you just say time is of the essence for me, I just need a real basic, concise answer to this question, right? Then it will reshape the type of output that it gives you and tends to be a better response too. Okay. So understand that tokens matter. All right. The next hot tip that I wanted to bring out was prime the pump. That's what I call it, prime the pump. And what I mean by this is kind of maybe you heard the term eat the elephant in little chunks. And this is important, one, because of tokens, and two, because of the whole context setting. So one of the things that I like to do is, especially if I'm using it as research, and maybe I already know where I want to go, but I want to build the context over a series of interactions within my chat thread, say within ChatGPT, Cloud, or Microsoft Copilot, all work the same, right? And so something super complex like quantum computing, okay, that's deep, right? Like, so maybe I should start with, are you familiar with quantum computing? And then I would really like putting respond with just yes or no. And it will tell you, I don't have training on that data, or it will tell you, I don't have enough information. I would have to search the internet, or I would have to do something. It will tell you in this case. But what it'll also do when you do this is it prevents its rambling. Because if I just left it with just that question, it would say, of course I know everything about quantum computing. And then it would go off on this random tangent trying to tell me all the things it knows in, 8,000, 7,500 tokens or whatever that is, right? Um, and that's what it's going to do. So instead, what I recommend is start with a simple question, prime that pump. Now it knows, okay, it wants me to know about quantum computing. I haven't given it some context, yes or no. Okay, cool, it could do this. You could also do this with like, hey, I need to build a project plan for this industry, for this whatever. Is this something you can do? Yes or no? And if it says yes, then go ahead and continue. So in this case, in this example, I might say I'm new to the field of quantum computing. So I'm now giving it its context. I'm trying to learn and I want to learn all about it, but I don't know where to start. And that's what I want to know. Right. And its response might be to give you a learning plan, or it gives you a very basic broad-based set of concepts, right, that you should learn in its order. And so from that point you can then pick out and say, okay, well, let's start by diving deeper into and then pick a very specific part of that. Again, by doing this, what you're doing is you're building the context over time without wasting time or tokens in the process, right? And you're staying very focused on the task. And then the other thing this allows you to do, because sometimes if you keep it broad and it stays broad, that pattern recognition that it has, it's going to start going haywire on you. Okay. So I call this technique prime the pump. I don't know a better way to describe it than that. But it's just taking things in little chunks and building context over time. That's the goal. And this is the give time constraints like I was talking about earlier. So try to use a context constraints or an emotional appeal, right? So for example, like I said, my boss is going to kill me if I don't nail this presentation or get it done in time or something like that. So they do recognize, like I said before, the speech patterns of emotion. They don't necessarily recognize or feel emotion. Okay. But if you give it a time constraint or say, or that emotional appeal, it tends to generate a more reasoned and concise response for you, which is helpful because you don't have to pick through all the flowery language that it likes to print out sometimes. Like I said, you can also just use, I'm short on time and it's really important that I just focus on this, right? And that also works pretty well too. All right. Sharing your files and other content. This is a hot tip. So one thing you can do, like when you're trying to build a plan, even now, if you pay for ChatGPT as an example, it has with Canvas, so you can even do it within the Canvas and it'll create this document. You can edit and all this kind of stuff within that, and then that adjusts its feedback for you and fixes content in real time. So it's a really handy tool within ChatGPT, that Canvas. But it can get really convoluted really fast, especially when you're building out a narrative or you're iterating a lot. And so once you actually get to a thing that's close, you might want to just copy paste that, say, into a Word document, do your editing in Word, save it, and then reattach it into Copilot or GPT or Claude, and then say, here's where I'm at. What do you think? Right? Am I missing anything? Did I get everything? Is this pretty accurate? Whatever, right? So you can kind of give it, or you can say, this is where I'm at and this is what I want. This is what I think is good. And I'm not discussing this further, kind of thing, right? So I'm ready to move on. Here I am. Because what that does, it kind of resets that baseline of knowledge. Otherwise, it'll start pulling from, things that you've been chatting, a week ago, right? And you're probably well past that point. And so um, another thing you can do is you can have a model create a template for you. And then you can fix that template and then you can put it back into the system and say, I need to fill this template out with information, right? Here's my context of my project, or based on the context of the project that I've given you, can you help me just kind of get a start and do a first draft, right? And so that may be what you do. So, share your files and your other content. This also becomes important if you create specific GPT. So like in Chat GPT, you have the ability to create a unique GPT that focuses on a very specific set of knowledge. And that becomes really helpful because you can isolate it from the rest of the threads that you have on the main program. And in that case, you can actually feed, let's say you want to learn about, or you want something, a GPT that's going to give you advice on how to implement AI in your organization, right? But you want to be consistent with the rules, laws, and regulations. You have the ability to you can feed in the NIST regulation for AI, right? You can feed in the PMI documentation on AI. You can feed all of these things into it and give it more information. And what that does is says, hey, I know what you know, but these are the things that I want to be able to focus on, make sure I'm in alignment with these documents. So that's what I mean by sharing your files and other content. Ask it for feedback. Like I was saying, you can say, I've already developed a project charter. I've already developed a policy. I have a contract. Can you analyze this contract? Proposals, legal documents. You can ask the AI to critique it for you. You can ask like, for example, I use ChatGPT to analyze legal documents sometime. And it's not my lawyer. I don't want it to be my lawyer. But what I do want it to tell me is say, is there anything too ambiguous in this document that I need to be concerned about? Or is there any, really detailed legal speak that I need to understand, and what questions should I have for my lawyer when I give this to my lawyer for review? And that can actually save you a bunch of time with that lawyer, basically going back and forth, right? Because you're paying by the hour or whatnot. And so that's been really important because it gives me some definitions of legal terms that I just don't understand. But you can do that in other things too. Here's a project plan that somebody's given me. Summarize this for me. What does this look like to you based on the other project plans that you've probably been trained on? That does help. So something like PMI Infinity may help with that because they're tied to like projectmanagement.com and all their white papers and all their research. So if you're trying to analyze the quality of your project related reports, that might be a tool for you to go to. Okay, instead of ChatGPT. And larger generative AI models have been trained on both well-written and poorly written content. So they understand the difference. And it's all in a variety of fields and specialties. So it allows it to identify those patterns in your document and then compare it to the information that was trained on the patterns that it recognizes from that. Um, So the other tip on this one, I just want to say that when using this tactic, the feedback quality is going to depend pretty heavily on the quality of the user prompt. So for example, you can say, does this paragraph effectively communicate the main idea? That tells the model to focus directly on structure and clarity. But if you do a broader attempt like critique this document, it's going to try and tackle it from all different angles. But remember, it's limited by the amount of tokens that it can spend on that response. So you may not even get a very complete response on that review. But don't be afraid to ask for feedback. It's just another way that we can use this generative AI to get better at what we're doing. Another tactic that I've seen used is where people, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, blah, blah, ask me 5 questions that will help you understand better what I'm trying to accomplish to give me a better output. Right. And you kind of force the system to kind of think through it, and then it kind of tackles it from more angles then and says, oh, well, if I had this information, this information, right, then I can give you a really good input. Okay, cool. So give them that information and then go. So that's what we're talking about when we say ask for feedback. Keep in mind that AI does have its limitations. So, for example, the model doesn't actually understand or evaluate the way a human expert would do it. It relies totally on patterns. So there's definitely a training bias. The feedback that you get from generative AI is just based on those rules, right? So if what you need is depends on specialized knowledge, you should probably go to an AI that's specifically for that. Keep in mind that there's also a severe bias for yes in generative AI. Of course, it can do anything that you want. It knows all the things. It doesn't actually know all the things. So be careful when you see multiple outputs, like I said, with 2 or 3 bullets. Surely there's more information there. When it gives you a fact or a quote from a book or anything like that, I would go online and go directly to that book. Go directly to the source. Tell ChatGPT or your Gen AI model, where did you get that information from? Right? So you can actually go and find that information. And sometimes it gives you a link and you go to that and it makes no mention of what the heck it even told you. So it's just making stuff up at that point. So no, discount it. Right. So I'd be careful with that. So just because it gives you something doesn't mean it's good. I've also found that it's incredibly wordy and it's very repetitive, right? So be careful when it comes to that too. It sounds really good on the first read, but then when it starts coming out, you realize, okay, that could have been cut down by a lot. Um, Doing this also helps you edit heavily. And I'm going to get more into that here in a second as we're about to wrap this up. But to prove my point, I asked ChatGPT how many R's are in the word strawberry. And it gave me this response. The strawberry has 2 R's. And we tried this last week, and this is what came up. And then Denise and I actually just tried it again today, and it gave the correct answer of 3 R's. And what's interesting, it didn't give the number 3, it actually spelled out the word 3 R's. So it was accurate this week, but early last week it was not accurate. So that's the other thing too, is just, just to highlight that it's inaccurate, but also at the same time, these things are constantly being updated and they're constantly being trained. So it probably realized so many people were saying that's wrong, and somebody probably put in there's actually 3 R's, and the system probably automatically learned and said, oh, you're right. And now if I ask it again, it's been trained on new information by so many people around the world that it now knows what the right answer is. And so even when things are wrong now, it might be right in the future, but you still can't just trust any output that it just gives you. At the end of the day, generative AI is a tool and it's nothing more, and it can't be the expert for you. You are still going to have to know exactly what you're talking about. It's a fantastic tool that you can use as an assistant. It can be a teaching assistant, it can be a writing assistant, it can be a business coach, it can be a research assistant, but it will never be the expert in place of you. Which brings me to my last tip: use multiple tools. One tool will not also rule them all. A lot of times you have to take the output from a Gen AI model, and then you can actually go to another Gen AI model and refine that further, or take it to another tool to process it, like Word, right? Like PowerPoint. Or if I was a graphic artist, right, I might take ideas out of Midjourney and then I might refine them further in something else like Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. And then I might take that into Runway ML and make a nice little video out of that. And that might be a demo, might not be a final product, but it gets me close to see what it might look like in motion, for example. So you have to use multiple tools in your workflow, and that's going to help you. So use these tools as a means to ideate and brainstorm and get you about 90 to 95% of the way there. But use them to find new styles, new ways of saying things, maybe, how can I reword this? And then just get some ideas, right? Maybe new ways of doing things. So you might get some ideas that way. It's really helpful to learn new tools. Like I said, if you don't know how to use Microsoft Project, for example, you can use this. You can use things like ChatGPT to learn how to use that. Microsoft Office 365 stuff, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps, and coding. It can help you learn how to do all of these things at a very fast pace, right? And at pretty low risk too, because even when you get errors, you can pipe that back into the system and it learns that way, right? And then it'll usually tell you the right answer afterwards. So it's pretty cool. But my main point then is to just don't blindly copy and paste the outputs. Edit heavily, make it yours, and whatever you do, don't lose your voice in this process ever, because you're still the expert, you're still the artist, and you're still what makes things beautiful and unique, right? AI is not likely to take that job away from you anytime soon. Look at what it did to this man's fingers, right? All right, folks, that was my last hot tip. Are there any questions?
Eric, thank you for your time. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier on in your presentation that overloading it with too much information on that immediate prompt doesn't get you the best results. So, for example, if I had a specific format or layout that I wanted to use, what would be the best way to input that layout first and then provide the additional detail to ask the questions, or rather, the document or whatever I want to do?
What I don't think I understand entirely. What like a layout, like a template or a
like a template. So if I had a template for like a cover letter or something that I wanted to use, and I wanted that specific template, and then I was going to feed, my credentials or details into that. How do I best get it to use that exact template without modifying it the way it sees fit?
Yeah, yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I just did this today. So, hopefully, if I can give you an example, hopefully, this can help answer the question. So, for example, I was loading in questions for a multiple choice post assessment quiz into our learning management system, and that system has a very specific format, right? Maybe I already have the questions written out or whatever. I can actually feed it the Excel spreadsheet that has the format in it and that as an attachment. And then I can have the Word document that has all my questions, for example. And I can say, can you take the questions that are in the Word document and feed it into the template provided in the Excel? So you're kind of telling it what's what, right? That's one way that it worked. But you know what it did? It just gave me multiple choice. It broke it out into its categories like the template, but in text format. And all I had to do is say, no, I mean like it has it in Excel. And then I copy pasted the actual that row that has like a headers. And I said, no, like in Excel, such as this in a table format. And then it came back and it gave, and I, instead of saying do them all, I just said, let's try with one question. Just try with the first question in my document, you know, and it gave it to me and it was a little bit off. For example, the asterisk in the template says it has to be in front of the correct answer. It gave it to me in the back of the word. So I just said, well, instead of the asterisk going here, I need it here, for example. And then I gave it an example. And then it had it right. And then from there, I said, okay, now do all 20 questions that I have. And then I piped it into that table. I copy pasted that into Excel, and boom, I was done. So that's a way that you can quickly integrate data from that you already have written into a format, or you can just tell it, I need it in this format. And then you can even put like in brackets that would signify that, you can just tell it, just replace the data that I have into the brackets where it's appropriate. And a lot of times it'll get that right too. But I would also say, tell it to start with one thing, because otherwise it'll take a whole bunch of time doing all the things.
Thank you.
Hey, Derek, we have a question in the Q&A from Lynette. So what are some beginner-friendly strategies for integrating AI into my existing workflows without requiring extensive technical knowledge?
Practice, experiment. I mean, that's really the best way to do it, right? I'll tell you, I had a really long evening chatting with ChatGPT one night. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. Right. And I started and I said, hey, there's just so much information out there. You tell me, what is the best way to use you for what I'm trying to accomplish? And it came back, well, what do you do? And it started having like a real conversation with me. And we had a really good, productive conversation about life and ChatGPT and how best to do that. And it kind of told me how best to use it. And like, for example, that's how I know you don't have to say you are an expert at. I'd said, these influencers keep saying this. Is that true? Is that going to give me the best response? And it said, no, you don't have. I mean, you can tell me that, but I'm an expert in all things. You don't need to tell me I am. Right. It just said, what I need to know is if you want information pertaining to that field. So however you are comfortable setting that context for me will work. So that's when I realized, wow, these prompts don't actually matter a whole lot in that way. Right. So there's just reasons for that happening. So the best way I would say is just start small, and if you don't know, just ask it. Just tell it who you are, what your role is, the things that you have to do, and the different tasks that you're responsible for. Then maybe just ask the question, what's the best way to leverage ChatGPT to whatever your outcome is? Do you want to improve do you want to optimize workflows? Do you want to automate tasks? Do you want to improve throughput? What are you trying to do? Do you want to improve the quality of instruction or instructional design? Or, do you want to improve the quality of your reporting on a project status? You got to tell it out.
So I'll just say, like, for any of you who are curious, you can a prompt like a that's kind of gone viral. I put it in the chat, but it's like asking ChatGPT based on what you know about me, draw a picture of what you think my current life looks like. So it gives you idea of like the what ChatGPT has learned about you as a person. So it's very interesting. So something to try. Okay, so from that, Chris Dixon had as a PM. Like, Chris, can you? I'm not sure exactly what you meant, or
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got cut off there. I'm just thinking, as a project manager, um, PMI has a lot of great courses out there. And I'm wondering if Derek has any opinion of which ones would be the best to start with. I know there's an entry level AI course. It seems to me it'd be a great way to get your CEUs and also to learn. Is there any one thing that Derek would recommend there within the PMI system?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact title, but I did their general overview of AI, I think, where it kind of gave some prompting examples and stuff in there. And I think that would actually be a really good follow-on for a basic, 1-2 hour experience to this conversation here, because now they kind of know the underlying workings and might help you understand the why when they share prompts, and because they kind of give demos in that a little bit. So you can kind of see what is kind of effective. I found that to be useful. That did help for me for prompting. I went through their AI PM certification that they just purchased from Cognilytica. That's a much deeper dive into what AI is and what it's used for, and kind of how best to leverage it for different things in project management. But that's a deeper dive. So, and then that's something you pay for too. But I would say as a basic kind of starter within PMI, that general overview was really good. And I know Denise has taken a few others that I haven't. So I don't know if Denise, you probably have a better recommendation than I do.
Yeah, I mean, PMI has the 3 basic ones that are free for any PMI member. The also, like in next year, any certification exam prep course that we have, those will be included as part of your course materials. But one's a general AI overview, one's on prompt engineering, which I found really helpful because it teaches you some. We call them prompts in project management, right? But like there's actual acronyms that you can use to help you remember how to write a prompt more effectively. So I found that very helpful. But those were the 2 that I took, and we're working on more. So if you guys have any suggestions, or if there is specific things that you would like to learn about, we can incorporate that into future webinars. I'm sure Derek would be happy to develop some more content around that.
Yeah.
Well, we just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope that you found this webinar helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be hosting a webinar, at least one every month. The next one is on positive risk in risk management, how to understand and use positive risk. So you can register for that from our website. Our website's here, contact information if you have any feedback. And then also the QR code on the screen will take you to our LinkedIn page. So if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, we'll post all of our blog articles there, upcoming classes, upcoming webinars, and everything. And you can find all the information about everything that we have going on. We're planning on doing a lot more in 2025. So if you want to be able to participate in more opportunities like this, then please follow us on LinkedIn. And then Derek, unless you have anything else?
No, just thank everybody for your time. Yeah, and if there's any input on courses that you are interested in that don't exist, we love to make stuff like that. And so we're looking at ideas for how can we build courses that are effective for people to, do things like integrate AI into their workflows. That's it. But thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.